we're sitting here talking to Monica Szymonik. She is a brand new author in this space, so we're really excited to have her here today. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her book and some of her experiences that she's had in the family courts. So Monica, I wanted to welcome you and thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule with your new baby girl. She's so adorable, by the way.
Thank you.
So welcome. Yeah. So I want to get right into interviewing you about your book because you just sent it to me. It's not even like released for the public to get it yet, right? And so I feel special because I got to read her book before it actually comes out. We won't do too many spoilers. We're not going to give all the good parts away. But it was a really good read. I actually enjoyed reading it. I didn't expect that because a lot of the books in this industry, as you know, they're very heavy read. And I found yours to be very light and enlightening. And I think that's kind of what you were going for, right?
Yes. The day I lost custody of my son, I think like the next day, this was like well over 5 years ago, I knew I was going to write a book. And in my head at that time, I pictured like, you know, a little waterfall and like a little bridge and some sad flowers and memoirs about my son. And I thought for years that that would be my book. But then I'm like, who in the world wants to read another devastated mom writing about how sad she is, you know? Not to take away the value of what I went through, but I just didn't want to portray more sadness because everybody who's been through the court system is already feeling that way. So there's really nothing I could teach anybody. And I decided to change the tune. It would have been June of 2015 is when I created this book in my head. So it took me 15 months to write it. And so it has a more upbeat kind of a little bit of sarcasm, like
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, I can tell you have a good sense of humor, and despite all of this that happened, I'm sure that's been very beneficial because, you know, it's really hard to find something positive in any of this when you're going through it. So I really commend you for that. So in your preface of your book, Monica, and I do want to say the name of the book, by the way, in your preface, A Broken System, A Broken Heart. Love the title. I think that you share a little bit, but you say that you're a non-custodial mom, right? Hold on, let me back up here. In the preface of your book, A Broken System, A Broken Heart, love the book title, by the way. And I think Stephen Krasner of Huffington Post would love it too because he has a whole series that he does in Huffington Post called A Broken System. So I think he'll love the idea that you have in your book. So in this preface, you say you call yourself a non-custodial mom. And you say the father is 85% and you have 15%. And I'm looking at some of the stuff that you wrote. You say that you get treated differently by other mothers that you encounter. And in fact, you said that you had some of these very same thoughts about mothers who had gone through it. And you talk about an event you actually didn't attend. And this is before you had ever experienced this. And you talk about an event you didn't attend because you, go ahead and tell me a little bit what you said, why you didn't attend that event when you found out there was a mom there who didn't have custody of her child.
Right. So this was right around late 2008. So this was very shortly before my issues started, interestingly. I felt like I had, and I wasn't aware of this. This wasn't like I was actively thinking this. I just felt like, it was kind of like, oh, no thanks. It was just kind of, I wouldn't have much in common with her. You know, her son was the same age as my son. And I just felt like it wouldn't necessarily be a good time because we have different, we have different interests. My interests are being with my son and being a mother, and her interests are whatever else is out there.
So which brings
And
me to, you assumed that she didn't have interest in being with her son, that she didn't really fight for him. Basically, that she wasn't a good mom, right? Okay.
yeah,
Um,
I
so
believe we do that
so
until
so
transit.
here's a tough question. Do you think, I know it's kind of hard to think back because I know you're a different Monica now, which we'll get to, that you talk about in your book, because your book you talk about transformation, okay? But are you kind of able to think back and picture the old Monica? And do you think that if you had been the one who had gotten the 85% custody, do you think that you ever would have realized that that was going on?
That the court system added layers of difficulties, like
Do you ever think that you would have seen non-custodial moms any differently if you had won? Do you think that you would be sitting here today?
I would absolutely not be sitting here today. And the feelings I had about other non-custodial moms, it was more like passive contempt. It wasn't active, like, oh my gosh, but it was just kind of a passive, like, oh, yeah, I guess she had her reasons. It was very kind of dismissive, and like, I guess passive contempt would be a good, and I might still be in that situation. I might still have those thoughts. Probably, yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, I like how you do make yourself very vulnerable in this book, which in my opinion is why I believe it's going to connect very well with others, that they're going to be able to connect to that and say, oh my gosh, she gets it, and that is such a wonderful feeling. And you talked about that in your book as well. And how when you were around other people that finally got it, that got you, other moms experiencing this, that in itself was a support process for you, right? So I'm glad that you went through it, but then I'm not glad. I'm glad that you went through it this way and that you had this experience and you wrote this book, because I think it's going to be extremely valuable for everyone going through it and others who don't realize what's going on. I think this book is a light enough read for them so that they can actually see some of the things they're not able to see if they haven't gone through it. And I really love that. And I love how you refer to that a court system that was functional. You said a functional judicial system would not deprive a fit parent of their rights. And I just love that phrase. It's eloquent, it's well stated. You seem to have a way with words. That makes reading the book very enjoyable, by the way. So one more question about the preface, and then we'll move on to the introduction section. There's just so much in your opening of your book. Wow. When I was reading it, it was just so much that we could talk about. So I'll try to keep this touch on a few sections and move on. So since you've been made aware of the corruption and the dysfunctional system, and we've established that, excuse me, that you've been the recipient now of the judgmental stereotype of second-class parent, non-custodial mom, where have you received most of your emotional support, other than outside from your husband? You mentioned him in there. So where have you received most of your emotional support that helps you get through this? And who has been most helpful and encouraging to you throughout this process? It doesn't have to be who, it can be what.
Fixed Family Courts was a huge one because I started following your webinars very early on. It was actually Joan Clough-Zanard who introduced me to you. I don't know if you recall who she is.
Oh, yeah, we love her stuff. She's a wealth of knowledge too. And anyone who doesn't know her website, PAS Intervention, they need to check that out. I was just on there again last night, and I swear to you, every time I check out her stuff, I discover something else. Even things I knew were there, but rereading them, I discover new stuff, process more. And she has a paper called Red Flags.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that paper. I think she has 170, might be 170 something red flags on there now to indicate if somebody might be an alienator or committing parental alienation. So, okay, so great. So she told you about us.
Yep, and she was also a huge support. I remember during my second trial, I didn't have a lawyer, so I remember calling her, because I know you know those days in court where you're in court from 9 to 5, you get home at 6, and you're like, and I would call her, and she would just give me as much time as I needed on the phone. And that must have been exhausting for her, because here I am, I don't know anything. I'm like, what's going on? They're admitting documents that are false and blah, blah, blah. And she just listened, and it was great. So I'd say she was my first, probably my biggest emotional support besides my husband. And she supported me so much that I don't really need her anymore, which is really good.
Wow. I know. So we need her data. We need her materials and her wisdom. That's for sure. We'll always need that. But you don't need to sit on the phone with her forever now, right? And sit on the phone with her all day. So
when I call her now, we bounce ideas off each other, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so on to your introduction. In your introduction, you say that you've been through a 6-year court marathon, right? Actually, you're in your 7th year now, right? So you're not done with court hearings, right?
No.
Okay, so you're still in the battle. And you wrote this book while you're going through it. This is your 4th time around, right?
Yes, I actually have a trial starting November 8th of this year. So we're 6-7 weeks away. I'll be in court all day long asking for equal rights to my son.
Pretty amazing you finished something of this kind of caliber and quality while you were going through that. So that just speaks about what this book offers to others, because it's apparent that writing the book, that you were living the materials in the book. You were using you were doing these practices in your own life, and it kept you strong enough to actually write this book. So I'm very impressed. So you also say in your introduction that you and your ex, the father, you were co-parenting fine, is how you put it. You were co-parenting fine for over a year, and that you even called the co-parenting functional. Yeah. But that was short-lived, and you put in there, it was sabotaged by the divorce vendors who successfully inserted conflict in your relationship. So can you elaborate on what happened? Was there no divorce for the first year? What was going on?
We were actually never married. So we went right from being a couple to not being a couple without that, wedge where you have to overcome all these obstacles just to get a divorce. So we split up, and we were living in the same home for about 8.5 months after we split up, where I lived in one side of the house, he lived on the other side. And it was pretty low conflict. I personally don't remember a single instance where it was so bad that one of us couldn't be there anymore. I was actually ordered to leave by the family relations the court-appointed evaluator, the person who goes in and does their exploratory search to look for problems. She's the one that told me I had to leave.
The ones that invade your privacy. So what do you mean told you had to leave? You guys weren't living in the same house, right?
We were living in the same house during the earlier part of our custody proceedings. I walked into court and I said, "Hi, I need to fill out a form because my ex and I, we want equal custody of our son. Where do I sign up for that hearing to ask the judge to just make that valid?"
So from day one, you actually walked in and said, "Hey, I just want to make sure that we have in writing." So you just asked them to protect the rights of each side.
Correct. We both knew from the minute we split up that we wanted equal access to our son, who was only 2 at the time. And I simply walked into court. It was January 9th of 2010. And I said, "Hi, I don't know where to go. I don't know the form, but I want equal time with my son. My ex wants equal time. How do I sign up for that?" And sure enough, next thing you know, we have an evaluator calling me, calling my mom, calling my employer, calling my son's doctor. coming to the home. And then she told me that I couldn't live there. And me being naive, there's no way I would have done this to now. Oh my gosh. She told me I couldn't live there anymore. So I left. I moved out immediately because I wanted so bad to get to have everything go smoothly that I literally just did everything she asked me to. And it completely backfired on me. I never should have left.
You never dreamed that somebody who works in this field, who's supposed to be an expert at it and professional, that they would be telling you something that might hurt you and your son.
Yeah, and I still have the email to this day. I have an email of her saying you need to move out of that house. I still have it. So,
wow.
You know.
And see, you must be working hard on that forgiveness, because I didn't see it anywhere printed in your book. Yeah.
I considered a loss of consortium lawsuit against her because it really is her doing that inserted so much conflict into our relationship. If you saw the 25-page report she wrote about myself and my ex, I'd say 96% of it was about my character. He just inserted so much she got my ex to turn against me. She just created so much chaos in our relationship, and it has never been fixed. My ex still has the same animosity towards me that he had the minute she inserted herself into our family.
Wow.
So.
Wow. And that wasn't there before, right? So.
No, I mean, you know, he didn't really like me, but he didn't hate me. You know, it's like the angst now is beyond anything that ever existed in our relationship.
It's really sad. Yeah,
it is
sad and unfortunately very common. It's a very common story. Okay, so you say that you two ended up in an epic. These are your words from your book. An epic mudslinging, Jerry Springer-esque fiasco, where a judge opted not to look at any credible evidence and declared that all 52 weekends of the year would go to the father. And despite the fact that the judge stated that you were a fit, attentive, loving, and appropriate mother, and despite the fact that you asked for equal custody from the very beginning, that in itself, you wrote, just sent you into a tailspin, you know, just spiraling into that black hole, right? Because it made no sense, right? Like, so when he did that, did you ever turn around and then file, okay, I want custody? Like, instead of doing equal, you just like lash out at him and decide, did you ever make any allegations about him? False allegations?
No, I couldn't. I could not morally ever do something like that. You know, of course, my irrational mammalian brain is like, oh, go back and swing. But I know, I'm 37. I still have like 40 years left on this planet. I can't go the rest of my life knowing that I made up this random crazy story about my ex. And I couldn't, and I haven't. To this day, I've never said anything negative about my ex in public record, meaning
right.
I've never made up or even exaggerated any flaws that he had.
Right. So you basically, right. You mentioned Gandhi later on in your book. And so you basically, I don't know if you were actively going through that in your mind, or maybe you read their, materials that you talk about in your book for so long that it was just an automatic that did you go through the process of, okay, Gandhi got thrown off the train and he decided not to attack back. He took the peaceful way of protesting by just not leaving their country because they did it as a way to try to drive him out. Making those decisions?
I did, not knowing a whole lot about Gandhi, but my father's a minister, and I'm not a super religious person, but I'm not religious. I believe in just the golden rule. Nothing. I don't want my son to ever look at my transcripts and say, "Wow, I can't believe my mommy said that about my daddy. That's not nice." So I really made a conscious effort to never, ever, ever disparage him ever to anybody. Definitely not on public. So, and that's something that I'm I think it made me lose more. I think if I had slung mud back at him, we might have kind of equal custody, because the judge would say, well, you're both just crappy parents, so here, just split it. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I never.
you actually mentioned.
What was that?
There was a comment. Yeah, I noticed there actually was a section in your book where you did mention that, you know, people who play by the rules and, you know, and do what they're supposed to do and are nice about it actually get hurt in this system. And so that's how you felt, right? That you were getting hurt, but you still didn't change. You didn't change into, okay, I'm going to make up allegations, all of that. So what did you change?
Nothing. I just, in both my trials, I had the same sort of demeanor, the same sort of initial argument. I did try to deflect some of the mudslinging a little bit in my second trial, so I was a little bit smarter and more proactive about not allowing mountains and mountains of bad evidence come in. You know, my ex had my journals from college admitted into evidence. Blogs that I wrote when I was 22 were admitted into evidence. Stuff I wrote before my son was even born was brought into evidence as full exhibits. And just
was he making allegations? Was he saying that you're bipolar, or, you know, was he trying to? Okay.
No, the evaluator who inserted all the conflict and told me to move out of the home, he lied under oath and said that my therapist told her that I had borderline personality disorder. So of course I went and asked my therapist, like, hey, did you say that? And the therapist was like, I never said that. And my therapist.
We did the same thing, like, you know, when my ex was doing the same thing. I went to a counselor who had known us before when we were married, and I decided, well, I'm gonna come see you several times, because isn't that funny? Because I was like, hey, if there's something wrong, then I want to fix it. I want to make it right. That goes to your writing about you. They make you think something's wrong with you. You do mention that if a parent does not, this is another quote from your introduction, if a parent does not have the incestuous connections with the right attorneys, evaluators, and judges during their divorce, they will lose their rights. So can you give us an example of how you learned that?
My so-called anecdotal evidence that caused me to write that was based on other Connecticut parents I spoke to. I would say it's equal between mothers and fathers in Connecticut. I don't think it's predominantly a mom or a dad state. They discriminate pretty equally. And I noticed that it's always like the same, like 8 attorneys and the same 6 judges that are causing all the problems in Connecticut. We have 3 million people in Connecticut. I believe we have, my husband knows, I believe it's 15,000. I believe we get 7,500 appeals a year from the family court, meaning 7,500 cases elevate to the appellate level. And most of those cases, it's like the same 15 people messing up families like crazy. And that's based on my anecdotal evidence interviewing parents in Connecticut for 2 years.
Sure. And you know, Stephen Krasner, the writer for the Huffington Post, that's been writing on the broken court system, just published recently this week an article on some research that he's done, and he actually has a chart in there where it shows that the judges who are contributing more, or not the judges, the attorneys who are contributing more to a specific judge will have more cases in front of that judge and will have more filings in front of that judge. So they'll run it. Whereas the ones who they don't, amazingly, it's a shorter process and they file less. So that's an interesting topic. So I'm not disputing your finding. I just was curious how you personally had discovered it. So thanks for sharing that with us. So it's kind of interesting because I know that you believe in equal custody, that you asked for equal custody right away. But then in my copy, it's a different page than probably what is in the published book, but fairly into the introduction, it says, quote, "I am the parent with visitation, and I'm the parent who has to rush my child to the primary parent." It kind of makes it sound like if I didn't know that you believed in equal custody and I had read only that, it would make me think that you had the golden uterus syndrome. You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to attack you, but I just want you to kind of explain or kind of tell me if sometimes, how do I want to ask this? I guess I'm being a little tough on you because Ron and I were trained to identify things that create biases in people. And so whether it's you or me or anyone else, I would point this out, okay? And so I guess I think that if, like you said earlier, if you weren't being hurt in this process, and if I hadn't been hurt in the process as well, so I'm also blaming myself for having this kind of what Cash Jackson would call like an apathy, a blind apathy, where we were kind of ignorant to this going on. But do you notice that do you notice sometimes that some of that creeps in and you have to kind of like still correct yourself, going, oh yeah, you know, and like did you think things when you were going through it, like, you know what, I took our son to all of these appointments. What is this court thinking that he would even be capable of doing this? Did you find yourself sometimes having to go back and still correct some of those things?
I know that to be honest, no, because even though I was the parent who oversaw my son's autism therapy and took him to the doctor and the reason I was able to do that is because my son's father worked full time. So it wasn't like I was doing that because he was, you know, sleeping on the couch all day or not. He was and is active. He was an active caregiver. He just kind of by default with our schedules the way they were. I work nights, he worked during the day. It just so happened that I was the one doing it. So I don't think I've ever necessarily, okay, I don't place myself on a higher, like, I know more about my son than you do, blah, blah, blah. I don't do that with the nitty gritty, like the showers and the homework and the meals, and not that. Only with regard to my son's autism do I think I have more knowledge than my ex. But that's simply because I educated myself more, not because I'm better than him. I just feel like I'm a little bit more assertive with getting him the autism treatment that he needs, but I didn't really show that off in court too much because I didn't want the judge to think that I had the golden uterus syndrome. So I kind of toned that down a little bit to look like I care about the equality aspect.
Right. And I agree with you. And anybody watching this, we do not think Monica has that at all. We just like to show sometimes that, you know, culturally, sometimes some people let that they let that go too far, and they think because you divided duties during your relationship that now makes you incapable or not a suitable person to be able to learn those things when you're not together to have equal time. We're not advocating for one person gets it more because they did it or didn't, but we're saying there's this cultural belief that whoever was doing it then should be the one to continue doing it. However, that's not how it turned out in your situation. But also, go ahead.
And third, even if that's true, like I'm sure there's plenty of households where moms do more of the care than dads, but once the parents split, the dads do come in and take over. You know, the reason dads aren't more involved is because moms are doing it. It just works. You know, you can't have. So I believe I certainly believe dads are more than capable of coming in and taking over some of those early childhood rearing, you know, duties.
Absolutely.
And I actually it actually kind of rubs me the wrong way when mothers call me and say, my ex wants equal custody. I don't know what to do. He doesn't know how to do anything for my child. I'm always the one that does everything and he has no clue what to do. And what I say is I give him some time, he'll figure it out in a month. It's not that difficult.
Well, and I love the part in your book where you actually say, hey, if you're not wanting equal custody, we actually say this all the time too. If you're not wanting equal custody, there's lots of attorneys who know how to do the system right now as it is. They can help you out. This book isn't for you. So I love that you identified that and how similar we are in how we address people who, don't understand that whether or not they like the other parent doesn't mean that they shouldn't be an equal parent to their child. But that brings me to a question with your particular situation. You have an autistic son, and when you were going through this originally, he was very young. I'm actually kind of surprised with the way that it's been explained to me with some forms of autism. I know some are more extreme than others, but I have parents sometimes that come to me going, they can't have all these changes in their routine. So I'm surprised you asked for equal. Is there no validity to saying that autistic children need to stay in one environment?
I think that's just that's the excuse my ex has been using since day one, is that my son cannot handle two parents. I mean, I'm paraphrasing my ex's testimony, but for 6-7 years, my ex has been saying the same thing. He needs stability. He needs stability, i.e., he shouldn't spend more time with mom. Whereas, my son, the judge artificially separated me and my son when he was 4. So if my son was able to overcome that, my son could certainly handle an extra day with mom a week, Or,
good point.
Like, I have every other weekend right now, and a couple hours on Mondays for my, that infamous Wednesday dinner.
Yeah.
I have my Wednesday dinner on Mondays. So certainly my son could handle a little bit of extra time. And if he could survive being separated from me at age 4, he could certainly handle seeing me a little bit more at age 9.
Yeah.
So I don't buy into.
I completely agree with you, but not having an autistic child, I wanted to ask someone who has experience with that. So that's really good to know. And that was what, if I were to say that, if I was to just guess that if they're going to school, that's like having a separate environment. I don't know how they could say having 2 homes would be a problem either. So that brings us to, so enough about that subject for now. Let's jump to the fact that you say that, quote, I don't have my parental rights to my son, I have my health. Tell us a little bit about how this experience affected your health and how it affected your business. I know you wrote about some things that were going on at work and how the divorce affected your work during this time period.
Well, it pretty much affected my new career. I received a massage therapy license, and very early on, I was constantly taking days off to go to court. But in the middle of my custody experience, the first time around, it's always the first battle that's the hardest for any parent, I believe. And I was showing up to work puffy-eyed. I was losing weight. My eyes would be red from crying because my lawyer told me I was going to lose custody. So I'm like,
being as pale skinned as you are, like me, you can't hide it. Your eyes are red.
Yeah, I don't remember crying necessarily, but I probably was. But I know that I would catch myself in the mirror at work and my eyes were always red, and I took a ton of sick time. I actually lost hearing in both ears from a serious ear infection.
Wow.
Within 2 weeks of the custody evaluator getting involved, I had a double ear infection. That never happens. I never get sick. So I was rapidly losing weight. And the biggest health, issue was more the health of my relationship with my ex was the biggest casualty, because we went from purely equal co-parents getting along just fine, putting our child first, to just constant fighting about me constantly asking for more time, you know, saying, I barely got any time because, you know, he got every weekend. He got all 52 weekends of the year. So I would say, can I please have this weekend in June? Can I have this weekend in August? And he would just get so mad at me, and we would just fight and fight and fight and fight. And that was the biggest casualty, was our co-parenting relationship just went out the window.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the courts made it, you know, the courts made it like, well, this is a battle. And in his mind, probably, I can't speak for what he might think, but if we were to speculate, he could be thinking, hey, I won the battle. Go away, right? Wait, so now at any point in time, do you think some of his behavior, like, did he ever involve another woman? Is there a stepmom? Okay. So.
He's been a girl for several years, and she's appears very nice, and my son, you know, he's always said nice things about her, so I'm thankful for that.
Okay, great. So your book is about pain, suffering, frustration, or is about dealing with, not about, it's about dealing with pain, frustration, anger, and grief, right? And so I find your book very insightful in those areas, like on my page 16, I don't know what page it'll be in the published book, but where you talk about mothers growing distrustful of the systems which are meant to protect them. So I feel that way still today. So I find that interesting that you're actually bringing to the forefront that this is a bigger problem than just, hey, these are a couple of parents who can't get along. But this is a long-term effect, isn't it? Because didn't you mention how this affects your son, right? And it's going to affect how he believes when he grows up.
I don't talk about it a whole lot with him. But what does the average 9-year-old think when he sees his mom every other weekend, and he sees all his classmates whose moms are always around? And you know, sometimes I wonder, is my son secretly thinking, like, what did my mom do? Why won't these people let her see me more? Why is this? One of the questions my son was constantly asking, starting at around age 6, was, because my son doesn't know that my ex doesn't want me in his life a lot. So whenever he asks, I say, oh, because the judge said so. Because the judge said so. Like, Mom, why can't I see you on your birthday? Because the judge said so. So my son started asking me when he was about 6. He started saying, why do you talk to the judge so much? Why, like, so I think he's wondering, why do I even go to this judge asking for rights, you know, when other kids aren't being told how often they could see their mom based on what a judge says.
Or worse yet, it's kind of setting a pattern for these children's beliefs that you have to ask judges for rights, right? It's ridiculous.
That's bad, and that's still not resolved. Like, it's still a thing that's just there. When I'm with him, it's like this thing that's this unspoken thing that I think he's thinking. Yeah. And it's really bad, because I'm not going to tell him the truth.
So, and then, that brings me to this question, because you know that the majority of the time in parents' orders, they have somewhere in there some kind of standing restraining order. You're not allowed to discuss any of this with the children. So that kind of leads me to, when you're parenting, are you afraid to share some things with your son, or even to make certain parenting decisions? Or you mentioned in there at one point that the evaluator held it against you for getting him tested for autism.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was so upset when that happened. I was like, I couldn't control my emotions back then. It was just
so, are you afraid to make parenting decisions?
I'm sorry?
Did it make you afraid to make parenting decisions?
I actually can't make parenting decisions. I don't have final say in really anything except for his autism therapy. So I really can't execute any parenting. I can't choose his religion. I don't think I'm even allowed to teach him anything about any religion. My ex is the one who chooses that. He chooses his educational, and that really ticks me off, because we're both parents, and I believe I should have some say. So I guess that question doesn't really apply, because I don't execute anything, because I can't. It's a court order that Dad.
Well, it kind of applies, because you wrote about an incident on your birthday where the dad said, hey, you can have him, and you don't have any ordered time on your birthday, so you were all excited, and you met him at a coffee shop, right? And you said one thing he doesn't like, who knows what it was. I'm sure it was totally just innocent, like, hey, I missed you so much, right? Oh my gosh, that's horrible, right? So whatever it is, so you mentioned you said something that made him withdraw the offer for you to have him for your birthday. So,
Correct.
so I guess you are afraid about what you say to your son.
Yes. My son was 6 at the time, so, which is good because 6-year-olds, you could kind of, it's a little bit easier to cover things up with a 6-year-old. That wouldn't be able to fly today. Nor would I even engage in asking for favors. There was a time where I used to ask for special favors. Oh, can I please have this extra time, that extra time? I was constantly doing that, and I think that irritated him. But I wanted to see my son, so I felt like I just wanted more time with him. So, so I don't engage in those behaviors. Like, I don't ask him for anything, so it keeps a lot of conflict. Not, it prevents conflict. Like, it prevents any opportunity for us to interface with each other. But yeah, I tend to just kind of.
The less you interact, the less stress it is on you because he doesn't get inflamed. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So in the coffee shop, the minute he said no, like, I kind of was like, oh, please, how about we just, he's like, no. And so I just said, okay, bye, and that was really hard because my son was like so excited. And then I had to tell him that, I couldn't see him, and I couldn't think of a quick enough way to make it not so that he doesn't figure out what really happened. Because I feel like I'm constantly trying so hard to make him not know what's going on. And that's really hard when your child is approaching 10. Like, how long? And the court doesn't tell you how to do that. The court doesn't say, when the child starts asking why he can't see mom and dad equally, you got to tell him this. They don't tell you how to explain these things to your child. And I certainly won't sit down and tell him that his dad's mean.
Well, and nor should they be in the business of doing it, but they've put so many restraints on you that it's like you said, it's like you're running to a king to ask permission for fear that he might chop your head off for something you have no clue you weren't supposed to be doing. So, so your book really, because this is such a stressful and confusing process to go through, do you feel that your book is more than just health and wellness book, but also a voice for women and extended family members?
Yeah, I really wanted this book to be for men and women. In fact, my first draft of the book was for both. Mm-hmm. And then I had a really hard time making it as authentic as I wanted it to be because I don't know what fathers really go through. So then I went through the book again and I got rid of all the dad stuff. And it's kind of sad because I don't want men to think they won't benefit from this book, but I really hope dads do read this book.
Yeah, I was going to say they're going to be jealous because this is the best book out there so far. So they're going to be jealous. So woman power, okay, that's going a little too far. I know. But
I kind of, there should be I know I searched Amazon. There are quite a few books for dads. I couldn't really find any for moms other than How to Get Custody Now. It's so awful. Like,
this is true, but yours is the best. So,
the mom's self-help.
Because the way I read it was you both compassionately uses the effects that the abuses in the court system have on not only parents, and this would be general, apply to both, but not only on parents who typically are ignored as no longer mattering anymore, but as well as the communities and society. And you can tell you really know what you're talking about. Another phrase that I love is when you say that the family courts, that what they're doing is like a bad custody ruling is like a forest fire in the family tree. And I just think that I'm just like, wow, who wouldn't relate? Men and women, extended family members, grandparents, cousins, right? Aunts, uncles, and you do mention them in the book, by the way.
his maternal side. It's so unfortunate, and I'm so thankful that he has a good amount of family on his dad's side, but he doesn't know there's so much about my family he doesn't know. He sees my family so little because he sees me so, and it's awful. You know, I want to know where he came from on both sides.
And that's an important thing, is that when parental rights are protected, they're also protecting the child's right to be with all of those additional extended family members, because there is so much that the child learns about themselves through not just you, but all of your family as well. So yeah, that's really important. So on page 19, again, that's of my copy. You can tell the researchers in us, we like to document everywhere we are, but you bring up religion. And you mentioned earlier in this interview how you really don't have any say, you don't feel that you have much of an influence on your son's beliefs or value systems or religion. And religion, by the way, is one of our strongest protected constitutional rights, right? And so, so we don't need to get too personal on, you know, what your specific religious beliefs are. I know you mentioned your father's a Lutheran minister, but that doesn't mean that's, you know, that's your personal beliefs or that's all you believe in. I noticed you covered like a lot of different beliefs in the book. You listed Jewish religion, Islam, you know, and then some of our like Gandhi, you know, some of the other beliefs and faiths and things like that, spiritual beliefs. So I think you really know, like you hit it on a hot button of ours, that's for sure. So the important stuff, the huge rights, like religion, that just completely get ignored. Did that ever specifically come up, like in your court hearings? Did anyone ever argue it specifically? So did you ever know you were going to lose that right?
No, I'll be honest. I had no idea I was going to lose custody, because even the other side said I was a good mother. So my ex and his attorney were like, "Your Honor, she's a great parent. Don't get us wrong." So I never thought I would ever lose custody. I thought it would be equal. It would be messy, but we would wind up with equal. And I thought this whole thing would be over. But no, the word religion never came up. But you know, you get your orders, and it says Dad gets to choose religion. So one thing I really don't like, sorry to go off the topic, but one thing I really, really hate that family court judges do is you have mom wants plan A, dad wants plan B. A judge creates a plan C and says you have to do it this way. So no, and like just certain things they put in, like that didn't even come up in the hearings the judge put in. Things that I can't do, that wasn't even disputed on either side. And I really hate when family court judges do that. So yeah, I basically lost the right to teach or raise my son in any upbringing. And I'm not an overly religious person, but it would be nice to know that that right is there if I want to utilize it. I think my ex has the right to teach my son whatever religion he wants. And I believe I have that equal right, but I don't.
And you were paying lawyers, right? You were paying lawyers then. And where was your lawyer in all of this?
My lawyer told me that I was going to lose custody before our first day in trial even started. So he said, "You're going to lose. So let's just make you lose as little as possible by being really, really nice. And we're not going to object to a lot. He had a very, very passive approach. I don't know.
They want to yell at moms for being hysterical. That's just disgusting.
Yeah.
It pisses me off talking about it. So we're going to move on to the next thing, because I want to keep this lighter. You don't want to get me into this. And you hit another really big hot button with me, which was your value systems become compromised. Your own value systems become compromised. You mentioned that actions, behaviors, and choices are affected, and that, quote, "the system that kept her moral compass in check is no longer there." You're talking to other moms at this point in your book. Did this happen to you?
Here and there, yeah. So it was always, I actually let my ex trigger me. So my biggest trigger is losing time. I got so little time with my son, so whenever that time was taken away, it just triggered like psychotic tendencies where I just crazy, you know. And so I would call, and be like, you need to let me see him. It's my parenting time. And then he'd hang up and I'd call back. So
and all of a
that didn't
sudden,
go on.
you're looking hysterical. You look like somebody that, you know, needs to be restrained, right? Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how they create that.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically I lost my parenting rights in March of 2011. And in September of 2011, I stopped all that nonsense. So fortunately, I only acted that way for 6 months, but it was reactive to what was taken away. And my son was so young; he was 4, and he was regressing. He wasn't speaking in full sentences after we stopped seeing each other because he was a late talker with autism. So he went from speaking in full sentences to like barely speaking, and I saw like all this regression in him, and that's triggered a lot of maternal protection instincts in me to just demand that I get more time with him just to offset some of that damage that it was doing for him.
Yeah. And you outline different stages in your book that people will go through, and I believe you called that the grief stage. So we won't go into all those details. They can read the book if they want to read all those stages, but it's very clear that you're very in tune, and I love how you simplified each stage that somebody goes through and help them through it. So it's very valuable in that. And so let's move on to chapter 2, because we kind of just flew through chapter 1. You said that you went from a fun-loving, health-conscious type that friends came to for parenting and wellness advice to someone who was too draining to be around. So you went from being fun to be around to needing others, but then they didn't want to be around you anymore. And that must have been really confusing too. So again, another hot button with me is, you said that it appears that, quote, this court had to keep my son away from me for his own good. Did your orders, because I know our orders always said this, did your orders actually say in it that these orders are being made for the health and welfare of the child in the best interest of the child?
Actually, I just wanted to correct something. The whole thing with keeping the child away for their own good, what I was referencing in the book was the judgments that mothers make when they hear about another mother losing custody. What they say is, oh, thank God, you know, the kid's probably better off. I'm sure the judge did that. This is like the blind faith that other people have in the judicial system, where if a mom loses custody, it's for the child's own good. So that's actually what I was referencing.
Well, but I get that. I don't mean to take it out of context, but I don't think really that I have totally, because other than you said you wrote it for that purpose, that's fine. But when orders are supposedly, even if it doesn't say it, but I bet you your orders somewhere say it's in the best interest of your child. When orders are being made where they've cut you out of your son's life, essentially they've terminated you. You just get a little bit of visits with him, but they've terminated everything that every benefit your son gets from you. And then they say it's in his best interest. So yeah. That would be saying that if they're doing what's in his best interest, they're saying keeping him away from you the majority of the time is what's good for him.
Yeah, and the basis the first judge used was really, really bizarre, because it was based on no actual evidence other than my ex simply opening his mouth and saying something. That was the evidence that the judge used. So Monica, you know, moved out of the home when the child was, 12 months old and didn't come back for 2 months. Like, he would just say stuff like that. Yeah. And I believe his lawyer forced him to say all those things because it was just bizarre. And I thought, that's never going to hold any water. There's no way to prove that. And sure enough, that's what the judge used to base his decision on, was that I was in and out of my son's life. Which is like such complete zero evidence to back that up. But so yeah, the judge said, Monica's been in and out of his life, and it's in the best interest that he's not with her, that he's with Dad.
Perfect examples of why we fight so hard to make sure proper due process is being put in place, because that never should have even been part of the fight. If they didn't file proper charges saying you're unfit, you abandoned. So in other words, you were held to different standards than a married family, because even if you were away for a couple of months and you two agreed on that, that is not abandonment. So the choices that you made, and I'm not saying you were, like you said, he lied about that, but I'm just saying, even if it hadn't been, it should not have been in front of a judge to judge you on your parenting rights, because simply put, that's what your rights are for. They are to protect you from these kind of egregious errors. And you didn't receive that. Your attorneys didn't use it.
Even my attorney told me not to worry about it. He said, don't worry, they have no evidence. So we're not even going to bother addressing that. So we didn't.
Right. And you said later on in that chapter that, quote, if I had known that I had constitutionally protected parenting rights, I would have asked my attorney to defend them. When did you find out that you actually had constitutionally protected rights?
That would have been July of 2013 when I started watching your webinars.
Like 2 years later. 2 years. I think they need to make our book required in the court system right away when somebody files, because they require, most states now to take a parenting class, like a co-parenting class, like a children in the middle kind of thing. And they require a lot of parents to start using Family Wizard, right? I think they need to require that they get a list of their constitutionally protected rights. I really do. So, so once you found out that you did have rights, did you ask your attorney to?
I did. This was my third attorney. This was a young gentleman who was great to work with. But I said, I believe I have constitutional rights. What is this? And he said, oh, you're just going to make the judge mad with that. We're not even going to go there.
Wow.
Look the good it did me.
Yeah. So basically, without your rights, you were told to beg and grovel and essentially kiss the ass of the court-appointed evaluator. The one that you knew didn't like you, couldn't stand you, was, for whatever reason, you have no reason at all, she just picked a side, right? Because that's what I guess they required.
Of knowing that she, and even my attorney knew that she was going to go against me before she even,
So you could no longer act in your son's best interest. And she was doing things to tear your relationship apart. So I know now you're, like you said, you're heading to a trial now, and you have actually put in the motions that we have on our website, and those are the parental rights motions, and for fighting to restore parental rights as well as protect the equal rights that you have and your son and the other parent actually has. He didn't have a right to he didn't have a right to your rights and your son's right to be with you. So since you put those motions in, though, I just want to mention a couple things. You sent me your transcript, and in that transcript, your attorney that you have right now sounds really good, by the way. And we'll have to say she's a brave warrior as well, because we know attorneys who do this, they, just like parents who get labeled and treated second class, so do attorneys. Attorneys will start
She's been grieved already for her standing up for another family who lost another mother who lost her children. She stood up to that judge who took that mother's parent away, and she was grieved. Don't know the details, but she's already been,
So she was reprimanded per se, like I don't doubt it, because the attorney on the other side, the father's attorney, what does he say when she says this? She's like, 6.5 years ago, this is straight from your transcript, the parties appeared before the court, and mother's right as a parent were essentially stripped away. And the other side responds back with, well, so in essence, the declaratory judgment, to my understanding, without having seen the motion, would be to either establish the rights to the party, which is not necessary, he says, in this type of case, or to give your opinion on a question of law, he's talking to the judge, which right now is something beyond the scope of what's in dispute now. So essentially he's saying, okay, judge, you don't need to use law anymore here, right? And the rights aren't in question anymore. Probably saying that because you've already been stripped of them. And he says what's in front of the court to decide is the child's care and custody, and as the judge indicated, best interest. I don't know since when those didn't have any law that applied to them, but according to the dad's attorney, I guess like you said, because they got away with not using any, they don't want the judge to apply any now. And he goes on to say, oh, judge, if you do issue an order, I'm concerned that it sets a dangerous precedent for this and many other cases. And he also suggested that your attorney tell you to go to the legislator to address your issues there, right? Because, and he said that your case he doesn't feel is based on question of law. So interesting to see that you've got two attorneys that are both trained in family law, and your attorney gets our motions and realizes that it does apply. This is what should have been done from the first place. And then the other attorney can stand up there. I don't know if they have a conscience or what's going on. I love your stance on that in your book, where you just stopped asking those questions because they would just drain you and stress you out, and it's on them, right? It's on them to carry this baggage with them. But it's very telling when you've got attorneys that are so brazen to stand up there and do that, which also leads back to your theory, even though you called it anecdotal evidence. I believe it's very valid evidence that there's a lot of corruption going on in this process, in this system, that is allowing these attorneys to be so brazen about this now and just outright on the record in your transcript state that judges should not make any rulings that are going to protect your rights. And by the way, why do you think they're doing that? It's your rights that actually protect you from this abuse of power. So that part where you said they used the evidence where there was no proof, it was just he said, she said. The reason they're allowed to do that is because they're not applying the protections of the rights. And as long as they don't apply that, there are no protections. Your rights are what protect you. And I'm so glad that you learned that. I think that if attorneys had been exposed to our motions earlier, which we didn't have, by the way, it took us this long to figure out how to teach other people to use the book, because this actually came from a culmination of, we published in May 2012, and we just published these motions a couple of months ago, 2016. I think, when did we publish them? May or June 2016? Yeah, and so that's how long it took for even us who created the material to figure out how can we help these attorneys and these parents use this material, right? Because it is so, it is such a hidden part of the process that's been, just totally ignored for so long that it was a lot of work for two people to figure this out. But I think it's been useful, right? I think that it's really letting this judge of yours know that, you know what, you're changing the fight up. Because you said the first 3 times you just did the same thing and you got the same results. And they're used to parents coming back and begging, because that's the process they set up. That's the system they set up. What they aren't used to is parents coming at them with this. And you can see that at the end of your transcript too, where the judge is like, like he goes to your attorney, you're going to give me a brief, right? so he's panicking a little bit here, going, and your attorney, I could tell, was panicking a little bit too, because they don't have a brief, which your attorney's right, though. They don't need it. The motions speak for themselves. There is enough there for that judge to perform his or her duty. And your judge, he's taking several weeks to get to this. And the other attorney wasn't even interested in submitting a brief, said that they'll defer. But I can tell that the judge knows that there is some, something to this here. And by the way, I do want to point out that the other attorney just wanted to focus on attorney's fees, didn't they? They just wanted to focus on money. Hey, I need my attorney's fees. They asked me to come here for no reason. So he's essentially trying to make it look like you're being frivolous or just trying to run up the costs on your on the father, right? Well, let me tell you that there is actually, we have a new training video coming out for these motions, and we actually have a slide. Oh shoot, my stuff closed because I had that slide up and I wanted to tell you more details about it. But there's a slide in this presentation where we address attorney's fees, and you're going to be really glad to know that actually you can ask for attorney's fees. So because what you're asking for are protected rights, these are rights that they should have applied in your situation. You have every right and grounds to ask for attorney's fees for having to do this. So we want parents to know that, and we want parents to know how to defend against, being charged the other side's attorney's fees. And it's simply that it's a simple defense. You just have to make sure you assert it. And parents not knowing you're going through the process sometimes forget that they can't just leave it up to the judge to do their job. You've got to get it on the record, which is why we put as much as we can in writing and tell you to do so, because you won't always get it all out in court. You're going to be stressed out. Judges are going to cut you off. But you do need to make sure that you assert an objection for awarding fees to them, and then assert that you're asking for attorney's fees for having to bring a separate hearing to have this addressed. Okay.
Yeah, the judge is going to hold off on awarding that until the end of the hearings, which it doesn't really make sense. I mean, he even said he didn't read the motion. So what is it costing you to be there when you haven't even read the motion?
But there's something more interesting than that in your transcript, and that is this attorney, the father's attorney said, if you cannot decide to award these to me here today, if you can't make that decision to award these to me, then I want you to defer, and I want you to hold off. So essentially what that attorney said, if you're not going to give me attorney's fees, then can we just wait for that ruling? So that's kind of interesting to me. Not that I don't know what role it will play, but from what we've seen in a lot of these is if you go to the next hearing and you didn't get attorney's fees awarded in this hearing, but we don't know what his ruling is yet. But a lot of times once you go through the next hearing, which is the final, right, the final trial, they're then not thinking about this hearing and the award of attorney's fees. They're focused now on the next hearing. And generally, a lot of times, parents end up having to pay, each side pays their own attorney's fees because each of you has, as long as you met some standard in the law, even in their statute, like change in circumstances or it's some prong of the statute, a lot of times they just leave each party responsible because it's seen as you each had a right to be heard. So I don't know. I'm holding out a lot of hope that they're not going to award attorney's fees to the other side just because you're asserting things that they should already be doing on their own. And I don't think they will. So let's go on. Later on, I kind of lost track of what chapter we were in, but it was on my page 26. You mentioned that when you stopped being angry with your ex, that you were able to have, quote unquote, more quality time with your son, reclaiming your health and going back to school to become a holistic health counselor. Has your son ever shown anger or alienating behaviors towards you?
Probably 4 or 5 times in his life. I feel like he's not at the alienatable age yet. That's a word I use. I believe within a year. He'll be 10 in a few weeks. So I feel like by the time he's 11, if he's going to be alienated, it's going to start in about a year. And I have seen so many kids in Connecticut be alienated against the parent who's trying to get equality, and it's really scary.
Yeah.
So
it is.
There's a few comments here and there, but I tend to deflect it. And he'll say like, "Why does my dad hate you so much?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't know he hated me."
Yeah,
that's too bad.
Yeah.
And then I just kind of the subject. But again, I wish they would just give non-custodial parents a handbook on how to deal with these questions. Because what am I going to do? Throw my ex under the bus and make my son mad at him? I'm not going to do that.
I wish they just weren't making non-custodial parents. So, yeah, good answer on that. So then later on in that section, you say you went back to court in 2013 to try and restore your equal rights, but that you just ended up losing more time. So when you filed this last time, because it's your fourth time around, are you not afraid that they might like completely terminate you? No.
Yes, I am.
So,
especially with my book coming out, and you know, it's a lot of parents might say, well, why would you write a book knowing that you have this custody hearing coming up? I can't keep living in fear. Yeah, I am scared. You know, the answer is yes.
Yeah,
It's just.
So, or they might say, why didn't you just wait till this hearing's over? It's going to be done in November, right?
But then there'll be another excuse it's always, I've been playing the don't make the court mad game for so long, and it hasn't worked. So I'm kind of just living my own path right now. And just
so as you put it, you're not playing chess with them anymore. You're checkmating them.
Correct. Kind of like, you know, I've been waiting so long because, you know, in the very beginning, the evaluator that didn't like me, she said I could have equal rights to my son as long as I was in my field full time. So, which is, how do you base parental rights on the profession you have? I was a massage therapist at the time. So, you know, what if I broke my wrist and I couldn't do my job anymore? Does that mean I lose my kid? So,
and and the same thing doesn't apply to the dad, right? Or maybe in her mind it does. Does she just go rip kids out of their homes and put them into foster care? I mean,
you know, he lost his job for a year and he never lost any time with my son. So I was employed full-time in my career something like 19 days after my trial ended, and I still didn't get my rights back. So it was
Did you call her and say, hey, I'm working full-time, I want my son?
I did actually. I said, you know, I did what you said I should do. I became a full-time, you know, I got full-time employment in my field. And she said, yeah, but you guys don't get along, so forget it. So the theme in my case is that we have the high conflict label simply because of the way I'm treated, not because of what I do. It's because of how I'm treated that we have this high conflict label. And that's why I can't get equal time. And my ex loves this because all he has to do is treat me bad, and he just gets to be the full-time parent over and over again. And the last trial we had, the judge simply would not award equal custody because of the high conflict nature. And because my ex threw a rock at somebody that was a friend of mine, that really made the judge, you know, it kind of set the tone that we can't get along. And, you know, when you have someone testifying against you, saying all these nasty things about you, of course the judge is going to think you're high conflict. So because he sat there and just said bad thing, all these bad things about me for days, because our trial was like 4 days long, the judge just said, well, he doesn't like her very much, so we're just going to let him keep the kid, you know? So
I think it's high conflict if you just come back into court, totally ignoring the fact that they forced you to have to do this because they took your rights. If they had protected both of your rights, you wouldn't need to be there. They don't look at that. I actually had to state that to my judge when he tried to put back on me. Don't you think your children are going to hate you if I make them move and come back and be with you or be with you more, you know? And I said, no, I think actually if the court gets out of our business and lets us each raise our children, that the children will get over this. I think this process, I told him, is stressing them out. And I told him that if I wasn't sitting there fighting for my rights to my children, I will have no children. And yeah, and you know the results of ours, we did end up getting, we do have equal again, or as close to it as possible. We live in different states. So you're right. You mentioned in your book that they just keep moving the posts. They just keep moving them. Every time you satisfy something, they just bring something else up. So it's clear that the carrots they're hanging in front of you are not real, and it's actually, as you put, it's actually set up to keep you coming back.
Yeah,
because they make money. If you don't keep coming back, they're off the payroll, right?
yeah. Filing fee $275 just to file to ask for rights is $275.
Right. And don't you have to pay for that evaluator? Right.
No, this gentleman was appointed by the court, which I thought was wonderful. He's not a bad, he certainly wasn't a bad evaluator, but this evaluator who completed his study June 6th of this year, said at the conclusion, he said, I'm not going to award equal custody. I'm not going to recommend equal custody because you're high conflict. And I calmly said, okay, can you explain to me my contribution to the conflict? I understand that, you believe there's contribution on his side. That's certainly evident because my ex isn't very shy about how much he dislikes me. But I said, can you please show me where I'm contributing to the conflict? And his response was, well, your activism with trying to reform the court system, that's high conflict. Or, he said, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. Your desire to change the system is conflict.
Yeah.
So I love to say, I guess Rosa Parks should have just stayed put on the bus because now she's a high conflict person. All that boycotting nonsense.
She didn't deserve protection of her any rights, right? She didn't deserve any rights because
They
don't make a whole lot of sense. So I guess it's good you put these motions in because, hey, you're changing up how you're doing it now. And it's, of course, like you said, the good thing is it's not going to matter anymore how much it pisses them off, because if you follow through on all the stages that you go through, if the judge doesn't, right, I don't like where you should. Now you do have something that is formidable, something that actually has teeth that can actually get them overcome, whether you put it into the federal court or whether you put it into the appellate court. You have a lot better chance now of overturning them. Your arguments are a lot better than, I'm a good parent, they didn't have any reason to do this. Even just saying I'm not unfit or clear and present danger was not overturning. You need all the arguments that we put into the motions and the book to get this. I think it's given people a lot more leverage. And I think they are making progress. I think that because parents have changed the way that they are speaking about this and understanding their rights better is what's gaining ground now. I think before Father's Rights, you mentioned in your book, they've had this movement going since the early 80s. And I remember when I got involved with them, when I was going through it, mine went from 2000, it started the end of 2005, but nobody knew about it. Like you said, you go through a silent period. So when I started actually reaching out for support systems, I think it was more like maybe 2008 or 9 or somewhere around there when I learned about parental alienation. And so essentially when I got involved, they were no longer making progress. They were all just kind of spinning in circles and nobody else was really taking interest. In fact, whenever I would mention them to anyone, like any groups that were not in these circles, like court groups and stuff like, they'd be like, oh, they're violent, they're abusive, they're dangerous. So they had a really bad, organizations, they had labeled them. They'd given them really bad reputations. And in fact, we still saw that when one of the head attorneys out here tried to sue the head of the Father's Rights movement last year. It might start the year before. I'm not as good with dates as you, but it wasn't too long ago. And they actually put that in their motion, that these are dangerous people. So they labeled them, and my feeling was they really weren't getting past the labels, not because of anything they weren't doing. They just didn't have some ways, they just didn't have all the pieces organized together to give them that leverage. So I'm not meaning to toot our own horn on this. We worked really hard on these materials, but I just want to point out that we've seen a big difference. And some people might say it's because the fight has been going on for so long. I don't agree. I believe that it's because they learned how to articulate their rights. And that's the only thing that really gives them any power. That is what protects people from corruption. It was Constitution Day yesterday.
Yeah.
And I posted a thing from Madison from Time Magazine online, and there's actually a section in it where it talks about that was part of the purpose of the Constitution, was to protect people from corruption. That's what your rights do. So, okay, so moving on. Well, I did want to ask you a question real quick about our book, because since I haven't mentioned the name of ours for people who don't know who we are, it's not in the child's best interest. Oh, you have one too. Thank you. It's not in the child's best interest, and that was published. It is published and available on Amazon, and you can go to our website of fixedfamilycourts.com if you want to find the motions that we created based on the arguments in that book. Thank you so much, Monica. And I think, Monica, that you've read through that, right? Read through that one. When you read it, did it make you feel more hopeful, even with everything you went through, even with attorneys telling you, no, you don't have rights?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
It's
good.
I wish I read it, in 2010. So, or it wasn't 2010, but I wish I read it sooner.
We've had a lot of parents tell us that they would have been able to be stronger and stand their ground more if they had just known how to counter what they were telling them. Like, they ask a lot of guys, they'll say, why on earth do you think you should even ask for 50-50? And they don't have a response other than, I'm a loving, involved father, which should be good enough, right? But it's not when you're talking about a court of law. They will trick you out of your, just like you said, I love your analogy, how you relate it to a chess game, because if you don't know the rules of the game, you don't know how the pieces work, and you don't know, how to move that piece, they are going to take advantage of you. That's just the way it is right now. Eventually, when we're all done, you and me and all the other advocates in this fight, eventually they will not have to know these rules anymore. They will just automatically be protected.
I'm scared for my 2 children. I hope they don't have to go through what I'm going through.
Yeah. We hope they won't either. We don't think they will. We think this is going to get changed fairly soon. I don't think it's going to take another 10 years or so to change it. I've got adult children. I don't want them to go through it. They're already adults. 2 of the 4 are already married. I'm horrified. I mean, I had to keep reminding myself to be happy for them that they were getting married, but the whole time I was horrified. I was just thinking, oh my God, they're going to do it to them again. They've already gone through the injuries of ours. Now they're going to do it again, and they're going to hurt my grandkids when I have some. So makes me feel the urgency, I guess. But we have to be patient, like you said. So, okay, so you talk about getting into parental alienation groups. You talk about some of the other things that you've done that have helped this movement along as well, like when you met Peter and he had you sign a parenting reform bill. Tell me a little bit about that, what you guys got past, that CT Public Act 14-3.
That was very interesting. That was the day that I went to testify in favor of, transforming or modifying or creating a law to protect children, because there was none in Connecticut, really. That was 2 months after I lost my second trial. So, I lost not once, but twice already.
That must have been difficult to testify on it right after that. You did it without crying?
I was licking my wounds all through the holidays, and I testified the second week in January of 2014. So I had already gotten through the initial crash that you get when you get your bad orders in the mail. So I was really scared to speak out. I was afraid of judicial retaliation. I still am. I'll be honest. Like, every time I speak out, I'm scared, but I just do it anyway because,
because you have to be able to do it yourself, right?
Yeah, and it's my duty to help others. I've helped others more than the whatever backlash I might experience. So, the net gain that's what I tell myself anyway.
So what was this law that you guys got passed?
In your state, I don't believe you have GALs. I think they're called amicus attorneys or something.
We do have GALs. We have
We do.
and GALs, yeah.
GALs are very routinely assigned to kids, to custody cases, and the GALs in Connecticut were just running roughshod over parents and children's rights, and it's just such a mess. And the reform bill was to limit the amount of involvement GALs can have, and also limit their fees. You know, in some areas, GALs are charging $250,000 to $400,000 for one case.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, my husband was billed $26,000 for his second GAL, and his first GAL I think charged like $38,000. So my husband's paid well over $50,000 for GALs.
And there's, you know, this isn't an option. This is court ordered. If you don't do it, they threaten to throw you in jail if you don't pay it.
My husband was incarcerated actually for not paying his GAL for not paying her $900 a month. He was incarcerated, so he was paying her. He just wasn't paying her the amount of money that they wanted him to pay her, which was $900 a month. Which who in the world has that kind of money?
How long did he spend in jail for that?
About 4 hours. But he had to pay copious amounts of money to get out, and that's the problem. So he had to pay money out that he didn't have just to get out of jail, and that's the problem. Is that they incarcerate you, and then when you get out, they look at as you paying money to get out of jail as a admission of guilt. Like it's almost like, okay, fine, I owe money. Here it is. Let me get out. You know, they throw you in jail, and then when you get yourself out, they think it's you admitting that you were wrong or something. So, and
then on top of that, you get out and you might have lost a job. You can't pay your bills because you just used that money. So you end up you end up in a vicious cycle, right? Where they're going to threaten to throw you in jail again because now you're going to get behind again.
Yeah, my husband actually spent Thanksgiving in a hotel room because he was afraid of judicial marshals knocking on the door and during Thanksgiving dinner, you know. And this was right after we attended the DC Reform Conference when you and I met,
yeah,
in 2014. But yeah, so the GAL bill limits what GALs can do, limits their fees, and you know, my experience with our GAL was great. So I didn't have personal experience to contribute to the GAL bill, but I did testify in support of the reform bill. But personally,
yeah.
My GAL was wonderful. He recommended equal custody, but the judge.
So it's helped in your situation or not helped, or there was no effect because you didn't have an issue with that? Okay.
My second trial, the GAL recommended equal custody, but the judge ignored his recommendations and went against them. So and then as a result, I lost time. Instead of gaining time, I lost time with my son. But I was the exception. I'm the only parent in Connecticut who was happy with their GAL, apparently. The other parents with their GAL were the ones who won. You know how there's like a winner and a loser? I found parents who were calling us to tell us how great their GALs were. And the reason their GALs were so great is because they took custody from the other parent and gave it to them. I'm like, oh, gotta go, bye.
Yeah, you're like, that happens. Well,
I got the wrong parent.
Yeah,
my husband
said equal when you didn't get it. Yeah. Well, I love your book. I love how the book is how you put it, change your mindset kind of book, right? It's a transformational book. I love how you put in there, like I said, you have a way with words, and you put that it's about finding your quote unquote new normal. And that really is what it is. Like you said, I mean, you know now your life, this is part of your life. Like you said, this is your duty. I love how your book is also speaking to advocates and helps train advocates to be involved, and how it has a compassionate encouragement for advocates. And it's interesting, Ron and I we were just talking about this yesterday before I ever even opened your book and was reading anything. So that's why I say, you know, when you start put in there at the beginning of some of the chapters, some of the phrases about, you know, the way you think is how you'll be, and all of those things. I think we're on the same wavelength here, because we were just talking about how there needs to be more training for advocates, and also more support supporting them through it, because so they don't get burnout per se. Lots of industries get burnout, and then they also don't know sometimes how to teach the others to become advocates, right? And then we lose them as soon as they're not involved in an active custody fight. You lose them and all their wisdom, their experience, because that person was never groomed to take action. And so your book is very good with that. Also, your book has a very nice way of giving information to people in little bite-sized pieces, and I love how you break down. I don't know if it's chapter 5 or where it goes from there, but you have a breakdown in there about doing things like house cleaning, maintenance phases. And so you break it down very simple and easy, where people can find wherever they're at now, whatever their phase is, and start to clean up their life and get back on their feet. You talk about a toxic drama vortex and not getting stuck in that in your maintenance phase. So for anyone that's watching your interview, I would say that a lot of them are in that toxic drama vortex stage, and that they want to go to that section of your book right away.
And it's comfortable. It's the toxic drama vortex is comfortable. It's enticing to go there because it's comfortable to hate your ex and hate people, and it's more comfortable to be there than to like be better than that and be peaceful. And it's like it's harder to not be there. You know what I mean? And
well, yeah, I do, because you explained it so well in your book. You said that it's easier to not take action and to just stay there watching TV and eating ice cream, because you said that's an easy, comfortable lifestyle, and you even said things that were so cute, like ice cream tastes good. So yeah, being in this drama sometimes becomes a way of life, like you said, and but they become draining, and nobody wants to be around them, and they're going to suffer depression. And we see so many parents that lose their life to suicide, and that's what that staying in that vortex will do. So it's so important.
The autoimmune disorders, the IBS and the arthritis and the migraines and a virus that you might have caught 20 years ago starts to manifest in your 40s. Right. And just
right. So they're just going to get more and more miserable is what's going to happen, and they won't be able to function. And like you said, they're going to use that against them in court too if they try to go back and restore rights. So
if you have stress disorder, they actually say, well, you have PTSD from losing your kids, we're not going to give your kids back to you now.
Yeah, exactly. So you are let me see here. You mentioned in there that being an advocate will help glue your heart back together. And that was so touching to me, because, after reading your book, I was just in tears, actually, because it's so important for people to be able to pick up a book that they can see that where they are, and that somebody is connected to that, and that there is hope, and that while you hear all the time people saying, well, once you get an injury, it turns into a scar and you have scar tissue. And you didn't describe it that way. You said it glues your heart back together, which tells them that, yeah, you might be changed, but you can create a new normal, as you put it. And instead of being in that, it's comfortable to do nothing phase, you can actually become a dynamic, vibrant, active participant in society again, helping others with that pain, and that you convert that pain over. So I really appreciate everything that you've done in this book. I know that it was very difficult, I'm sure, while you were writing it, because you had to decide not to put a lot of things in there. I think that's the biggest challenge for writers, right? So what are the 3 things you would tell people if they were hearing this for the first time and they were just now going through their divorce? What are the 3 things you would tell them to do right away?
Well, what I do tell parents this. I get a lot of moms calling me, and they're just hysterical. I was served, and now there's a family relation study that's going to start. and I don't know what to do. And should I get my son his own bed? And should I stop feeding my daughter? And I would never want to go back to that. I would give my right arm to never be in that situation again. So I kind of tell them, like, you kind of have to go through that craziness. It's almost a rite of passage, but I would tell them to try to set boundaries around your ex. A lot of times they're living in the same house with them. So I say, you know, just try to set as many boundaries as possible. And I actually tell them to, like, Google boundary setting, because I have a hard time explaining some things. So I just tell them to Google it. And I actually send them to Bill Eddy's highconflictinstitute.com website on creating.
I love that site. Yeah.
It saved my relation. I don't care what anyone says. I think I have a low conflict relationship with my ex. He's going to say we're high conflict, and that's fine. He's allowed to classify whatever he wants. Yeah. I think I have a low conflict relationship, and it's because I use the BIF model. And I would recommend that they are very brief and, you know, and very boring. Be as boring as possible with your ex, as weird as that sounds. If you could kind of take away some of those coals or whatever what's that thing that gets the fire going? Is it coal or ember? I don't know. Log.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just a match.
Yeah, match. Try to, like, keep as much stuff out of the, you know, have boundaries. Like, don't not feel it, but channel that into, like, you know, find a friend to you know, get that junk out. Not try to set as many boundaries as possible with your ex, meaning just
don't let him push the hot buttons. That's what you said in your book. Don't let him push those hot buttons.
Yeah, and that will save. First of all, it saves your docket. It keeps your docket less full, because I'll be honest. There's at least 12 to 15 contempt motions I didn't file against my ex, simply because it's just more stuff you're throwing in. And I would never tell someone not to file contempt. I don't give legal advice, but for me, less was more. Letting the you know.
Yeah. I actually ultimately ended up getting my rights restored because of filing the enforcement contempt. But what I would say, not, you know, tell people not to file, because they say this all the time, is all these other lawsuits. Yes, I understand you have lawsuits, you have injuries, but it's draining to prepare for those, and it takes your focus off of you and your child. I understand focusing on family court to get your rights restored back. You have to do that. But all these other lawsuits, like, oh, do I have tort damages, and I'm going to go file a RICO suit, and that's the part that I would agree with you on, you clearing from your docket. Now, if you get it resolved on time to where then you have some added resources to be able to do that, then maybe. But I do agree with you. I think there's other ways to resolve this. I think the only reason the corruption's existing is because we are not forcing these courts to recognize and respect our rights, and that once we do that, these will become the exceptions and not the norm. So.
Yeah, and probably the other two things I would recommend is to just, it's so hard. Don't, you know, add in as many healthy foods as, my background's in nutrition, so add in as many healthy foods as possible. And there's so much information in my book about nutrition, and adding in your greens and your glasses of water and your superfoods and your probiotics. So to continue to add those in prevents one from diving into a pint of ice cream and, you know, having flare-ups from their autoimmune disorders, aggravated because of the stress, and then the toxic overload of all the sugar, and, you know, so probably, like, bringing in as many healthy foods as possible during this stressful time, because your body will burn up, like, vitamin B and vitamin C with all the stress.
Okay, so setting boundaries, eating healthy, and then what would be a third?
I didn't start meditating until very recently. I would have meditated more when I was in the beginning phases of, because, you know, when you're meditating, you're forced to shut down and do nothing for a period of time, and we could use a little bit more of that in society in general.
So your self-talk about what you're letting her head and those kinds of things. Okay. And I think we kind of gave 4 because we said clear your docket, like don't make your docket too full.
Yeah.
But that's kind of setting boundaries, I think.
Yeah, it kind of goes with the boundaries. Like, if I went to court for every little thing that my ex did wrong, they would definitely say we're high conflict, you know, and that's unfortunate because I'm basically not allowed to defend myself really because they're going to go, oh, you're high conflict. But I don't file contempt. I just let it go, and I hate it, but it's going to be worse if I go to, this is just in my case. I know that if I went to court for contempt, they would just say you're high conflict. So I don't go.
Yeah.
Not that people shouldn't do it, but that was my way.
Yeah. I like it. I like it. I love your materials. I appreciate you being here with us today. And amazingly, baby slept for more than an hour unless daddy's in there with her. Okay, well, I didn't hear her, so it's been a pleasure. We have been very lucky to have met you two, and I actually have been connected with your husband on LinkedIn long before he ever met you. I don't know if he told you about that, but we had some interactions way back on LinkedIn.
He and I both were attending your webinars before he and I even met. So Joni is the one who introduced me to you, and she also introduced me to Peter.
That is really cool. Wow. Okay, awesome. So you guys both knew me. So okay, well, very cool. So this was just fate. It was meant to be. So I appreciate it. You have a great day, and everybody get her book. Get her book. Where did they get your book? We didn't tell them.
They can order on www.groundwork2health.com. Groundwork to Health is all one word.
Groundwork2health.com, and you want to get the book, A Broken System, A Broken Heart. Do you have one to hold up for them?
Oh, it's still in the process of being printed.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So get a broken system, a broken heart from groundwork2health.com, and she has lots of other services on there as well, and nutritional services and some support services. So go there, find out her other information, order the book, get our book, Not in the Child's Best Interest, from fixedfamilycourts.com. Let me
I think they
see it
together as a bundle because you have to know your constitutional rights also to be healthy.
Yeah, this is very true. Thank you, Monica, and we're gonna sign off for now, but we look forward to hearing any updates that you have, and anyone that has any questions for Monica, can they reach you through your website?
Oh, certainly, yeah. There's a contact button on that site.
Perfect. Okay. Well, you have a great day. Thank you so much.
Good night.